Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoteric and continuing the series on the MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project, more specifically the work-in-progress Sega Saturn core. And you guys have been really enjoying the preview videos I've been doing, putting the core side by side with real Sega Saturn hardware. So we're going to be doing that again today with one of the Saturn's most popular games of all time, and in my opinion a top 3 arcade racing game of all time, Daytona USA. Now do be very aware that this is just a preview, it's not indicative of the final result because the core is still in development, so we're just having some fun. And before we get too far involved, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined to want to support the channel, I got a Patreon link down below as well. But I remember when I first got my Saturn, I played the ever-loving hell out of Daytona USA, and even if it is a very inferior port off of the Model 2 original, it's still one of those games that absolutely everyone who's owned or played a Saturn has taken a look at and knows very well. And you'll see here we're moving over to real Sega Saturn footage. Pay attention to the logo in the bottom left hand corner of the screen so you know what source we are watching every single time. It's going to be really important when we talk about the fine details about the comparisons and the differences. And big thanks to Andy D for helping with the capture, and just so you guys know, he's helped me a ton on this series as well as the MiSTer FPGA community in general in the background, and he's currently part of a film project raising money on Kickstarter right now, and as of the recording of this video they are getting very close to the $500,000 goal, but they're not there yet. So if you've appreciated anything in these videos, if you know Andy D from around the Discord, just go toss him $5, do it for me. I don't ever ask these sort of things, but he is probably my favorite person named Andy around, maybe outside of the kid from Toy Story. All jokes aside, getting right into the footage, we are on the MiSTer FPGA first, and you will see a slight difference in the video quality because one of these is coming HDMI out and one of them's coming RGB out, which is pretty much the standard operating procedure when it comes to Sega Saturn. And honestly, as far as RGB video signal, the Sega Saturn has the best quality of any console ever to ship, in my opinion. You can feel free to disagree down below, but just one of those things, the RGB out is perfect. Now as we move over to the Sega Saturn capture, you're going to see that we move the camera out a little bit, but otherwise this is still the Daytona USA you know, love, and remember. So get a good sense of what they both look like on your screen. This is just kind of getting you ready, priming that pump to see some side-by-side comparisons. You can really see how incredibly close the core is getting to real Sega Saturn hardware. MiSTer on the left, Sega Saturn on the right. You will see over HDMI the color brightness and intensity is lifted a little bit, and I actually really like that. Those Sega blues in the sky, the greens on the trees, I think look extremely good over a digital signal. But of course on the right hand side of the screen it looks spectacular as well on analog RGB. But the reality is the performance between these two games, at least in the first part of this video, are absolutely identical. I cannot see, feel, or detect any difference in how these two things perform. And I've been playing a lot of Sega Saturn games in the background, MiSTer FPGA to my real hardware, just to kind of check into how things are going. And on the Daytona front, the work that SRG320 has done has been so incredibly impressive as to replicating a real Sega Saturn hardware in FPGA logic that honestly, if I handed you a controller right now and just told you to play Daytona USA and did not tell you what you're playing it on, I think 10 out of 10 people would be 100% confused as to what they were actually checking out. Now moving back over to the MiSTer FPGA source again, look at the dithering on the carve, look at the colors, get a good sense of how everything looks and functions, because we're going to go back to that side-by-side comparison in just a moment to show you again how close these two things really are. We finish there on the end of the race. As we come into the second course, this timer here counting down to go is frame accurate across both sources. Once the level loads in, every single frame happens on the exact same frame from MiSTer FPGA to Sega Saturn. So when we talk about cycle accuracy, when we talk about things happening in the exact same manner, using lock sources like that really helps me determine if the code is executing across real hardware and MiSTer FPGA at the same rate. And in the intro to the races, it is 1-to-1 locked. But let's talk about audio. We're going to do 2 sound samples. First MiSTer FPGA, then Sega Saturn. Listen, see if you can tell any difference, and I'll be right back. Now that you've heard both audio sources, tell me down below which one you like better. For me personally, the HDMI digital audio coming off MiSTer gives more clarity to the vocals as well as the sound effects, so that is my preferred here, but it might be different once you hear it because I'm listening to the uncompressed audio, you're listening to the audio once YouTube has stepped on the compression pretty hard. But I wanted to time out the race here because there is a pause between the race stopping, you losing control of your vehicle, and your position coming up on the screen. Once you lose control of the car, there should be a set amount of frames in between when the car stops and when you first see that place text come in from the right hand side of the screen. So this is another area once we lose control and the game starts running code in the background without player input that we can compare the core directly against real hardware performance, hoping to see the exact same thing out. So you'll see here we're going to time out the car and we're going to immediately go to a side-by-side comparison so we can see exactly when the frames come in. Now this is a loading situation, so there can be some slight deviance, but you will see here as we come in, we're going to go from 5 all the way down to 0, and what you're going to find is even if the car stops moving ever so slightly differently, the text comes in from the other side of the screen at the exact same frame cadence, again being cycle accurate. You will see here that it does load into the menu quicker, and in some instances MiSTer seems to load ever so slightly faster from what I've noticed. And let's just take a look at another comparison here. We're currently on MiSTer FPGA per the logo, and what we're going to do is just kind of sync up to a set frame. When "Gentlemen, Start Your Engines" comes up on screen the first time we see that text, that is going to be the area that we're going to use. To load into the race, it was exactly 8 seconds and 43 frames divisible by 60, so you're talking almost 8 3/4 seconds there to load into the actual race. We're going to do the exact same thing on Sega Saturn with real hardware. We're going to go from the same frame and we're going to do the math to find out how much quicker, slower, or on par it loads in from real Sega Saturn hardware, and the result of that is going to be 8 seconds 39 frames. It was 4 frames off, but loading is sometimes a variable just depending on honestly how clean that disc is, how scratched it could be. This is a fun comparison and it's incredibly close. 4 frames divisible again by 60. And as we do a side-by-side intro to the race on the third track, again all of this is lock solid synced. Now as far as the graphics are concerned, the performance is concerned, there is no discernible difference between MiSTer FPGA and real hardware that I can tell in any of these comparisons. The core is running everything the same way that hardware would as far as the look, the graphics, the polygons, all of the textures, everything just seems to feel exactly like it would on real hardware. And that is just showing how close the core really is in certain games to running par with Sega Saturn. And I know you guys love all these comparisons, so they are a fun thing to do. On the right, we just restarted the race just for fun to kind of give you a look at 2 different parts of the course at the same time. But again, if you just watch these things side by side, I could switch the logos up and I could basically trick 9 out of 10 of you if you weren't paying attention to the color intensity. That's where the real spread is here. On the MiSTer FPGA side of things, you're getting a little bit more vibrant of a color and you're getting a clear image because we are on HDMI. If we captured these both with analog sources, and if you want to see that, leave me a comment down below. I can try my best to get some analog captures in. You would basically see the exact same image across both sides. But that is how impressive the Sega Saturn core has been up to date, and it just keeps getting better. So if you want to see more of these side-by-side comparisons, leave me a comment down below and recommend some games to do this with. Again, these are not reviews, the core is not done, therefore we are just doing this kind of for fun and to show you how good the core currently is. If you want to sit down right now and play Daytona USA on MiSTer FPGA, you are having an indiscernible experience from real hardware, and honestly, the audio over HDMI just makes those iconic Daytona USA soundtrack tracks sound that much better, and I think that is definitely a win here. But these are super fun to do, and honestly every single time I synced up a locked frame from MiSTer FPGA to Sega Saturn, everything executed to the exact same frame cadence. So as far as the cycle accuracy, at least on Daytona USA on the current build is concerned, they are doing exactly the same thing 1-to-1 down to the frame when the player does not take control. Obviously, once you get control of the race, all bets are off because things are happening in a completely different manner. So that's why I use those locked video sources to see what's going on. We timed out on the left and we're still racing on the right. But that's the current situation with the current MiSTer FPGA Sega Saturn core, comparing one very popular game, Daytona USA, between real hardware in MiSTer FPGA. So this is just showing how good the core is, and as it improves, it's going to get even better. But again, if you like videos like this, recommend some games, do direct comparisons down below, and I'll see what I can do. But short of that, we're done, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.